In the modern world, our perspectives are defined by the places we inhabit. How different would we be if we went to a different school, grew up in a different neighborhood? Would these things change our life's trajectory? As high school journalism students living in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, these are issues that we recognize but may not fully understand.
Let's hear some of what we're thinking about when we think about Forsyth County and Winston.
I wrote down that Forsyth County is very close-knit, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
I thought of Moravian because of Old Salem. I just have good memories as a kid of going down there.
I said downtown just because I live pretty close to there and growing up, and even now I go there a lot just for food and just be downtown. I don't know, I feel like the downtown portion of Winston-Salem really kind of captures how artistic and how creative our city is.
My word was separated / segregated because of Highway 52, which is a divide line, and then also just the way that our city was built. We're still in we still all live in the same places. There's not a lot of crossing over racially, I would say.
Our project, Placing Identity, explores how geography affects our sense of selves, economic opportunity, access to healthy foods, and so much more.
Hey everybody, I'm Fleet Wilson. I'm here at lunch at Reynolds High School, and we're going to ask kids about how where they're from is affecting where they're going and how they place their own identity. We'll be showing students 6 cards, asking them which of these 6 traits are most crucial to their identity. Do you feel like there's any stereotypes that come from where you live, or how does where you live affect who you are?
Yes, actually. Well, where I came from affects who I am. When I usually tell people I'm from Detroit, they ask me if I used to gangbang or if my family used to gangbang and things like that.
So how does that affect how you view yourself?
At first, I used to think that I used to think that's something I have to do. Just where I come from, it's just that's something I have to do. But now that I've seen different things and growing up in a different era, it's I see a different view.
Part of what our section is trying to do is to figure out how various people would describe their identity, and then we're trying to talk about the different factors that play into your identity, because for some people where you grew up plays into your identity, for some people your race, your sexuality. So identity is a different thing for different people, and we're trying to simply portray how those different things can all affect your life.
To me, placing identity is this idea that we all fit into a larger narrative, that we all fit into a larger framework, both in time, in space, in sort of understanding who we are and where we come from.
This is Danielle Zulkman, a journalist who spent over 2 years photographing and reporting on the impact of residential schools in Canada. These boarding schools were where Native American children were taken after being ripped from their families to be assimilated into Western culture.
I think the most devastating part of the residential school legacy is the fact that it broke this generational chain in Indigenous communities, where while the grandparents' generation and their grandchildren's generation may have had the opportunity and the space and the time to be immersed in their culture, that middle in-between generation had lost everything, had forcibly lost language and spirituality and clothing and dance. To miss that generation, to miss that link, really hurts your ability to retain your identity in that way. You know, if you're a child growing up and you cannot speak your language with your parents, who do you practice with? How do you keep those bonds? How do you keep those connections?
In response to seeing the multitude of negative effects residential schools have had on Native communities, Zolkman decided she needed to find a way to show both the people who grew up in these schools and the experiences that made them who they are in one image.
This became my route to something different. You know, this is not really a conventional technique that's used in journalism, and I got a lot of pushback when I started doing it, but I believe that when people see something like this, they think, that's odd. And they have to decipher more, they have to think about it more. It makes them stop and actually try to engage with what the story is behind the images.
She would blend together the foreground initial image of the person and the background depiction of their trauma. The effect is a haunting and translucent representation of these people's identities. This is a powerful way to portray identity. Our visiting filmmakers used video based on Zolkman's technique to portray Charlene Hunt, a member of the Lumbee Native American tribe, which is located in North Carolina. Hunt also works to educate people about the realities of poverty and its connections to identity.
To me, poverty is the inability to move from a space that you've always been used to, whether that's education-wise, whether that's if you come from a broken family. It's what you've always been accustomed to, and it's the inability to move out of that to excel at a different level or to change your mindset. To me, that's what poverty is.
Finding ways to present ourselves to the world is a fundamental human struggle. Our internal sense of who we are is a powerful thing and can have positive impacts on our lives. However, the ways others perceive us can have an equally detrimental effect.
We thought portraiture specifically was really important to identity because it allows us to show groups that maybe are stereotyped or marginalized, like really what is important to them and what like makes them who they are and what makes them unique.
This is Highway 52 in Winston-Salem, a significant dividing line for the city. The west side of 52 is defined by big buildings and rapid economic growth. However, on the east, many residents are trapped by poverty and economic stagnation. For this reason, Winston-Salem has become known as a tale of two cities. Forsyth County ranks third worst in the country for economic mobility, a major factor in generational poverty.
Do you know what the term economic mobility is?
I've heard it before. Economic mobility is like it's like fluctuate, and it like you can move up and down really easily in the economics and stuff.
Do you think living in Winston-Salem provides people economic mobility?
I don't, just because a lot of people who have been, like their moms have been poor, their grandmoms have been poor, like that, it goes through and it keeps going. I've seen that a lot.
So economic mobility is a person or family's ability to move up or down in the economic scale or in income, and it's basically also saying like how where you're born really affects how well you do like when you get older and your future.
Dr. Craig Richardson, an economist from the Winston-Salem State University, came to our classroom to discuss the roots of poverty and economic mobility in Forsyth County.
You know, we have traps for people right now. People who work hard, they want to get out of poverty, and we have traps. Every time they earn a little more money, you know, they're going to get kicked out of their housing, they're going to lose their Medicaid. There are lots of things they lose, so there's lots of reasons not to move up.
Out of all the states in the U.S., North Carolina is among, I'd say with 5 other states. North Carolina is one of the reddest states, and obviously that's negative. And specifically in North Carolina, Forsyth County, at the age 26, kids average will make 26% less than other people from other states. So it being dark red opposed to the bright blue is very poor.
Rich aren't all hardworking, poor aren't all lazy. There's just a cross-section of humanity at every income level. And at the poor level, there are going to be some people who are more ambitious than others. At the rich, there are going to be people more ambitious than others.
Richardson highlights a misconception that many people make when they think about homelessness. Many do work hard to get out of poverty, but are often met by something called the cliff effect. As soon as they make any progress, other factors prevent them from making more money and becoming more successful.
So the minute you start to work hard, you fall off a cliff. Right. It's a benefits cliff.
Right.
And we have all these little traps for people, and so it's not that they're not working hard.
Right.
They don't have those ladders to go up like the rest of us.
I'll admit, I definitely thought that it was a lot like what you put in, you'll get out, and for that, it was really humbling for me too, because I live on the west side of 52, so things have been pretty easy for me specifically, but I think it's really humbled my view of Forsyth County.
We tell people, work hard, do your best. So what if that mother does want to go back to school and get her education? She needs to find childcare. So who's going to keep her kids while she's in school? And then if she does get a better job, where's that sweet spot where she still needs to keep her assistance until she makes enough so that she can actually afford to do for her family on her own? Because honestly, poor people want what everybody else wants. We want to be all doing the same thing and hustling for ourselves. We don't want that assistance, regardless of the images of you see on TV of people wanting to stay on assistance. Nobody wants to.
Yeah.
On top of this, the taxes that are imposed on this population make it even harder to break out of the cycle of poverty.
Right now, the poor pay the highest tax rates in the country, what we call implicitly, because every time they make $1, they have about 75 cents worth of benefits taken away. Right. That's a 75% income tax rate. Every time they make $1, they have 75 cents taken away. Nobody else pays those kinds of tax rates except for our poor, and that's another reason why we have such a hard time getting people up and out.
In Forsyth County especially, it is important to keep in mind the hardships that homeless people face on a day-to-day basis when it comes to climbing up the economic ladder, or even in finding food.
Do you see any examples of poverty in Forsyth County or Reynolds as a high school specifically?
I do see a lot of people who just go without a lunch just because they can't afford it.
Forsyth County is an area plagued by food insecurity, with 1 in 4 children being hungry. During our trip to the Salvation Army, we visited a local convenience store, Northwest Discount. This is where many of the area's people are forced to turn for their groceries. However, by no means is this a nourishing option.
21 grams of sugar. The only good thing you can drink here is water.
When we went in the convenience store, we were supposed to be able to find eggs, milk, a can of soup, and bananas. And we did get the eggs, and we could find a half gallon of milk that was tucked over in a corner in a freezer that had beer right next to it. And we weren't able to find any bananas, or I don't think there was any fresh produce at all. And really the experience, there were a lot of empty racks and just empty aisles, and the aisles that were full, none of it is nutritional or things that I think we'd ever think about being the first thing that we buy.
Just 2 miles west of the convenience store stands an abundance of large chain grocery stores that offer a wide variety of healthy options. In our school alone, about half of the student population is fed through the free and reduced lunch program, and the majority of these students wonder where their next meal will come from. The food options are limited for those who fall beneath the poverty line of about $20,000 for a family of 3. Often we think of food insecurity as something we might be able to perceive or detect, but it is much more invisible than many expect.
When we talk about poverty in this country, even concentrated poverty, please don't ever think of third world children walking around dirty with flies. That's not the type of poverty that we have here. We have people who are in poverty who have master's degrees.
I can't even imagine what it would be like to be a child that is thinking about when their next meal is going to be, when they have so many other things that they're worried about. You're thinking about taking a test, taking an exam, what group of students you're going to hang out with, all the other things. But if you're on free lunch, there's probably other things that you're worried about too.
The issue of children's food sources can't fix itself, and as such, innovative new ideas are rising to the surface, potentially bringing a brighter future to the community. Children who are hungry during the summer will have one more way to receive lunch in 2018. Winston-Salem Forsyth County Schools will have a food truck beginning in June, with its primary purpose to serve kids who need extra assistance when school is out.
You think about Meals on Wheels and all these other options, and so we thought, what if we take the meals to the kids? They can't come to us, but we know that they're in need, and if we get the meals to them, they'll be able to have that nourishment they need in those summer months to come back engaged, energized, ready to go in the fall months. And so that was kind of how the food truck was born.
It was kind of surprising to see that there's such a large gap, so it made it a lot more personal since I know people that live east of 52 on that side with so little access, so it kind of made it hit home more since it was closer.
I think for me, I live in a more rural area outside of Winston-Salem, and I come through across 52, so I pass through areas where their healthiest and their best option of a grocery store is really just a convenience store. But even though I see that every morning on my way to school, I never realized it was such a big problem or that people in my own community were so unaware of that.
Another part of what this film is about is poverty and homelessness in Winston-Salem. Do you notice a lot of homeless people in Winston-Salem?
Yes.
And what do you think causes that?
Bad choices and I don't know. I think just bad choices.
So we basically just asked everyone these 3 questions about where they notice homeless people, what things contribute to homelessness, and some negative connotations about homelessness that they hear or think about.
One of the interesting things for me with the negative connotations was people didn't just think okay, you're homeless, you don't have money. It was homeless people are almost inherently bad with money. And then also there's a struggle that people notice. They don't know whether they should trust homeless people when they ask for money or not. So there's a level of dishonesty that they view homeless people.
In the mainstream media, you don't usually see a lot of positive stuff about homeless people either, and I think that kind of contributes to most people's connotations of homeless people. So I think we could probably do a pretty good job or hopefully do a good job of kind of changing that, showing the other side of things.
I really hope we can just show that they're human too. I think that's the biggest thing that we need to do.
The Salvation Army is an evangelist organization dedicated to providing charitable services internationally. In Winston-Salem, the organization manages a slew of initiatives, including several family stores, boys and girls clubs, and a family homeless shelter named the Center of Hope. Our class made a trip to this shelter to learn more about our town's homeless population.
So we have 2 laundry rooms. We offer detergent. You can wash your clothes for free. We don't charge you for anything. The thought process behind it is that
Jamise Bowen has been born and raised in Winston-Salem. She is now the shelter manager at the Center for Hope and was able to get to her position through an open-minded attitude to people and places from all walks of life.
I've never been homeless before, but I think the thing that I've learned most from people who are homeless or who have been homeless is it can happen to anybody. And when I say anybody, we've had people who've had their JD in law from Wake Forest here. We've had college professors stay here. We've had people who had a 3rd grade education stay here, and they were in the same room.
If you think about Winston-Salem, most people think it's a good city, everyone has jobs, everyone's doing well and things, but it's really not. If you look underneath, there are a lot of us that are going through this. Whether we're in a shelter, on the streets, even if you have your own home, Poverty is still really, really big in Winston-Salem, and I don't think people understand that.
Jasmine Williamson is a mother of 3, and back in August 2016, she was given 5 days to leave her residence.
I stay with people, they get tired of you, they put you out. You have a little difference with you, they put you out.
After staying with different family members for a little while, Jasmine moved her family to the Salvation Army, where they currently reside.
So coming here was the hardest decision I've ever had to make, but it was the best decision I've made because now I'm doing what's best for me and mine.
Just because we have a job don't mean we don't still need help. You know, we don't get that help, we're really gonna struggle. So it is hard, but at the end of the day, we still have to fight and continue to do what we have to do to provide for our children.
Martika Lattimore moved to Winston-Salem when she was 12 after living in Harmony, North Carolina. When she moved to Winston-Salem, she lived with her mother at the Salvation Army shelter. Now she works at the same shelter, helping new families and residents transition into life at the shelter.
I kind of understand a lot of the residents, and I kind of compare myself with them sometimes. So
We've always lived, you know, check to check, month to month, never knew what we were going to do. We've always been on food stamps. Never had a father in the home. With me, it's just me and my kids. So, I mean, being here has really made me humble myself. It really, really has.
Why am I here? I feel like I'm being held captive, against my will. Not being able to be me and free. I've been only given this view, so boring and depressing. Wondering, what is that building? How did I end up here? How do I escape?
It's really just a circumstance. It's not because anyone deserves anything. It doesn't make the children any less than their peers. And I think that's something that we know internally, but it's something that we need to think about more often, because I think our default is to be like, oh, like, that person's homeless. Like, I wonder what they did to get themselves in that circumstance. And there's often nothing that they did. It just kind of happens sometimes.
For me, like, I am female, and so when I think about part of my identity, gender is definitely part of that. And there's always been like this sort of gap between women and men for hundreds of years. And so I think as time goes on, female empowerment has become more and more important and like vital to our culture. And so when we're talking about like women in Forsyth County, it's really important to like touch on that.
No one respects females like they should. They feel like they can just do anything they want to, and nothing can be said about it. They're like, they can talk to a female a certain way or treat them a certain way. Like, for instance, if I was to be talking to someone and a male was to come, because of that male presence, and if he was to start talking, I would be looked at to stop talking. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you feel like where we live in Winston-Salem that females are more vulnerable than men?
Yes, they are.
Okay, well, you need to go. I can't tell you what it was.
Let's just think about looking at.
I am Deji Gaffney. I go to Glenn High School. I live in Winston-Salem. I'm a part of LEAD.
Be considered poverty.
Lead Girls of North Carolina is an organization that dedicates itself to help young girls find their voice, confidence, and drive to make good decisions and be successful. Lead Girls exists to help equip adolescents with the right tools to improve unhealthy situations. Deja believes that being a part of Lead Girls will allow her to communicate openly and be herself.
It's influenced me well. It's been I've been able to like express myself more than I have been. Going to all these different like sponsorings like we do for Lead, it's been helping me more wanting to talk in front of other people and being able to express myself the way I want to. It's also nice being a teenager and also having other girls that's able to connect with you. on a serious level, it doesn't really matter what it's about, but they're able to like understand what you're saying. I like being here.
Lead Girls really puts a lot of emphasis on when you look at lower income, being able to have access to resources. So we really try to reach people where they are. And the first thing that we really try to do is, what do they have access to? And I do think it does start with that self-awareness piece, and that's why we put a lot of energy in self-awareness.
Even in the most difficult situations, there are places you can go to find help, to find people who are like you. You're not alone. And Lead Girls is a group that helps to expose you to other people that you can relate to.
As far as identity, I feel like it's so important to give people a voice. And it's so important to let these girls know to be true to who they are. And it's important for them to understand that this is not the end. This is only the beginning, and no matter their circumstances, that they can go to the next level. And I think a lot of times people are in situations and they feel like they can't get out of them. And that's where that intergenerational kind of comes in. But it's breaking the odds and knocking down the walls.
I really want the audience to leave with a better understanding of like how Winston really is, because I definitely didn't realize that until I started working on the film. And Lead Girls is a great example of what people are trying to do to help that, but then also there's such a bigger need. So I really hope, even though people get a really good idea of what Lead Girls is, they're encouraged to do more than they're doing right now.
Hey guys, quick announcement. We're going to, in a minute, start pulling people to take the photos, and then you're going to come over here, and we have the 6 words laid out. You're just going to place it next to the word that you think most describes your identity.
I'm going to place this under gender because I feel like as a woman I have a lot to prove for myself that I can do anything a man can do in that way. I think I'm going to put mine under generations because, I don't know, I feel like this generation is pretty special and it's really cool to be a part of something bigger than myself.
I hope people take away from this film that you should never really just render someone's life down to one sort of trait about them or stereotype about them, and that you need to sort of witness the wholeness of their life to understand what's going on.
The degree of empathy that is needed just when talking to people who are homeless, and not just looking at them as if like homelessness defines them as their identity. Everyone's like a three-dimensional character that is not just defined by one quality, and especially of that of homelessness.
You could be doing just fine and it could hit you like a truck, and then next thing you know you're in really hard circumstances and it's a lot more difficult. So we just really need to open people's eyes up and say that it can happen to anybody. There's no exceptions when it comes to poverty.
I go to a school that has a lot of very privileged people, and it's not always like that. So being able to see that other side of it allowed me to kind of understand.
I hope from our section of the film, viewers will realize that not everyone that lives around them has such a privileged lifestyle as them. That something as simple as like filling your refrigerator can become so difficult for those even within Forsyth County.
I was always kind of just thinking, go in and, get the interview done. But I think like kind of making a personal connection with the person is extremely important.
I hope that after watching this film, the audience looks at different groups of people, groups who they don't belong to, in a different light, and seeing like the stereotypes mostly aren't accurate, only scratch the surface, and that there's so much more to these groups of people. And I hope we're all considerate of how we portray them through the media, through even conversation.